My name is Charlotte Hay, and the sea has always been my home. For 27 years, I served in the United States Navy, facing storms, rescue operations, and rough seas that would test anyone's mettle. But nothing prepared me for that summer in Malibu, when my life changed forever. After retiring from the Navy earlier that year, I decided I needed a new purpose. I couldn't imagine myself away from the water, so when I saw the job posting for a lifeguard at the Pacific Paradise Resort, one of the most exclusive luxury hotels on the California coast, I didn't hesitate to apply. The resort manager, a man named Douglas Prescott, was impressed with my resume. "Your experience in offshore rescues is exceptional, Mrs." he said as he reviewed my application. "But the work here is a little different." Different was an understatement. In the Navy, I was accustomed to discipline, clear hierarchy, and strict protocol. At Pacific Paradise, the focus was on the guest. Experience, constant smiles, resort-branded sunglasses, and an attitude Douglas described as relaxed but vigilant. The water safety team consisted of 6 lifeguards, led by a veteran named Marcus, a 50-year-old man with tanned skin and eyes that never stopped scanning the pool. He had been a competitive lifeguard in his youth and now managed the team like a small army. "Welcome aboard, sailor," he said when we met, a respectful smile on his wrinkled face. "I'll show you how we do things around here." The first few weeks went well. The training was intense but familiar. CPR, first aid, water rescue technique. I already knew all of this, but I was willing to relearn. Marcus appreciated my experience and often asked me for advice on emergency procedures. "You have good eyes," he told me one day as we gazed at the resort's main pool, an expanse of turquoise water surrounded by plush lounge chairs and palm trees. "You see dangers before they happen." It was true. Years of sea watch had trained me to spot patterns, to sense when something was wrong before I could even name the problem. I watched the children in the water, instantly recognizing which ones needed extra attention. I noticed when an adult drank too much in the scorching sun, putting themselves at risk of dehydration. That's why I didn't understand when everything started to change. It was subtle at first. Marcus started to be more absent, citing meetings with management. Then one day, he called me for a private conversation in the security team's office. "Charlotte, I'm retiring," he said, his voice more weary than I'd ever heard it. "My knee can't take it anymore, and my wife wants us to move to Arizona to be closer to the grandchildren." My chest tightened. Marcus had become a friend, a mentor in my transition to civilian life. "Who will take over leadership of the team?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. I had only worked at the resort for 3 months, but I was clearly the most qualified member of the team. Marcus looked away. "Management has already chosen him, a guy named Ethan Brooks. He comes from the Golden Sands Resort in Newport Beach. Apparently, he revolutionized their water safety program." I felt a pang of disappointment, but tried not to show it. It wasn't the first time I'd seen a position that deserved to go to someone else. In the Navy, I learned to swallow my pride and move on. "When is he arriving?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Next week. I want you to help him settle in, show him how we do things around here." I nodded, ignoring the uneasy feeling growing in my stomach. Ethan Brooks arrived on a Monday, driving a shiny red convertible and wearing what I could only describe as a stylized version of a lifeguard. Uniform red designer shorts, a tight white t-shirt, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He was 32, with sun-bleached blonde hair and the kind of smile that sold to. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were already assessing the pool, the people, the resort, as if he were calculating the value of everything he saw. "Nice to meet you, Charlotte," he said, pronouncing my name as if it were a curiosity. "Marcus told me about you. Navy, right? Must have been intense." There was something in his voice that suggested he didn't think my military experience meant much in the world of resort pool. 27 years, I replied. "Specialist in rescue operations and first aid in extreme conditions." "Fascinating," he said, clearly not fascinated. "Well, things are a little different here. We're in the hospitality business, not military operation." Over the next few days, it became clear that Ethan had a very different vision for how the security team should operate. He introduced new routines, new uniforms more revealing to please the guests, and a new motto, "Smile first, save later." What does this mean? I asked during a staff meeting, unable to hide my disbelief. It means, Charlotte, he replied with a condescending smile, that our primary job is to make guests feel safe and welcome. Rescue is secondary, but we're lifeguards, I argued. Our job is to keep our guests safe. Ethan laughed, as if I'd said something naive. Statistically, how many real rescues do you think we do a year? 3? 4? Our true value lies in creating an atmosphere of safety and luxury. I glanced at the other staff members, Jason, Amber, Diego, and Mia. They all looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke. They were all young, in their 20s, working at the resort while attending college or pursuing acting or modeling careers. For them, this was just a temporary job. For me, it was a calling. The changes continued. The weekly rescue training Marcus had implemented was reduced to a monthly session. The reaction times we regularly practiced were replaced by classes on customer service and photography techniques for social media. I tried to talk to Douglas, the manager, but he was completely supportive of Ethan. The numbers don't lie. Charlotte, he said, showing me a chart on his iPad. Since Ethan implemented similar changes at Golden Sands, guest satisfaction ratings have increased by 22%. Occupancy rates have increased by 15%. What about security? I asked. 0 incidents, Douglas replied with a triumphant smile. See? The system works, but I knew it wasn't that simple. 0 reported incidents didn't mean 0 risks. It just meant we were lucky. And then came the day of the physical fitness test. Marcus had always insisted that each team member be able to swim 200 meters in under 4 minutes and perform a simulated rescue in under 2. These were strict standards, but necessary. Ethan decided to upgrade the tests. We need to be faster, he announced during a morning meeting. At Golden Sands, our standard was 200 meters in 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and a rescue in 1 minute and 45 seconds. It wasn't a huge difference, but it was significant, especially for me. At 14.9, I was almost 2 decades older than the second oldest member of the team. I made up for in technique and experience what I'd lost in sheer speed. On the day of the test, we were all tense. Jason was first, completing the race with ease. He had been a competitive swimmer at UCLA. Amber and Mia also made it, albeit by narrow margin. Diego missed the simulated rescue by just 2 seconds, and Ethan made him repeat until he succeeded. When my turn came, I felt all eyes on me. We'd worked together for months, and they respected my experience. Now there was doubt in the air. I dove into the water for my swim test, feeling the familiar embrace of salt water. Pacific Paradise had a seawater pool, filtered and heated for the comfort of its guests. I swam with all the efficiency I could muster, keeping my breathing controlled, my movements economical. As my hand touched the edge, I glanced at Ethan's stopwatch. 3 minutes and 32 seconds, 2 seconds over the limit. It wasn't bad, Charlotte, Ethan said, his voice falsely sympathetic. For someone your age. I ignored the comment and positioned myself for the rescue test. The simulation involved swimming to a training dummy, securing it properly, and bringing it back to shore. It was something I'd done hundreds of times, both in training and in real situations. But this time, as I swam back with the dummy, I felt a sudden cramp in my leg, perhaps a consequence of the extra effort in the previous race. I fought through the pain, completing the rescue in 1 minute and 50 seconds, 5 seconds over the limit. Ethan shook his head, his face a mask of professional disappointment. Charlotte, he sighed. You're off the mark on both tests. For seconds, I argued, and I make up for it with experience and judgment. Rules are rules, he replied. Everyone must meet the same standards. Later that day, I received an email summoning me to a meeting with Ethan and Douglas the following morning. I knew what was coming. The meeting was short and brutal. I was informed that I was being transferred to the resort's seniors activities program, essentially teaching water aerobics classes to elderly guests. Your talents will be better utilized there, Douglas explained, not meeting my eyes. And the pay is the same. It's a matter of image and capability, Ethan added. Our guests expect lifeguards who represent vitality and youth. I'm being pushed away for being too old and too slow, I translated bluntly. We're reorganizing the team based on skills and aptitudes. Douglas corrected, his corporate language not hiding the truth. I accepted the transfer because I needed the job. My Navy pension was good, but not enough to live comfortably in California. And to be honest, part of me was relieved not to have to work with Ethan anymore. My water aerobics classes quickly became popular. Many of the participants were veterans or spouses of veterans, and they appreciated my direct and respectful approach. I created a program that combined therapeutic exercises with survival swimming technique. You're never too old to learn to save yourself, I always said, but I kept an eye on the main pool. From my new station in the quietest corner of the aquatic complex, I could still observe Ethan directing his team. What I saw worried me. The new lifeguards spent more time posing for photos with guests than observing the water. They were constantly distracted by their phones, taking selfies for the resort's official Instagram. The vigilant attention Marcus had cultivated was fading. I tried to talk to Diego and Mia about my concerns, but they were too busy adjusting to the new regime. Ethan knows what he's doing, Diego said. The resort has never been so busy. It was true. Pacific Paradise was thriving under the new approach. Reservations were at an all-time high, online reviews were enthusiastic, and management was thrilled with the increased revenue. And then came Independence Day. The resort was packed for the 4th of July celebrations. Entire families had booked months in advance to enjoy the privileged view of the fireworks over the ocean. The main pool was packed from dawn, with excited children and adults relaxing with patriotic cocktails. My morning water aerobics class had ended, and I was getting ready for the afternoon session when I noticed the change in the weather. Dark clouds were beginning to form on the horizon and the wind was picking up. Any sailor would recognize the signs. A storm was coming. I let Amber, who was now the activities coordinator, know that we should start preparing to close the outdoor. Ethan said we're fine, she replied with a shrug. The forecast says the storm will pass north. I glanced at the main pool, where dozens of children played, their laughter carried by the ever-increasing wind. Parents sipped their drinks, unconcerned by the darkening sky. And then I saw her, a little girl, no more than 5, in a red swimsuit and yellow flotation devices. She was in the middle section of the pool, where the depth was beginning to increase. Her devices were deflating, leaking air slowly, imperceptibly. Her parents were nearby, but distracted, talking to another couple. Her behavior caught my attention immediately. There was no screaming or flailing. There rarely is when someone is truly drowning. Instead, there was an alarming stillness, a subtle, vertical movement as she struggled to keep her head above water. I looked for Ethan or any other lifeguard. They were all gathered at the pool bar, watching a bartender demonstrate cocktails. A photo shoot for the resort's social media, I figured. I didn't think, I just acted. 27 years of training took over. I entered the water, moving as quickly as I could through the groups of people. The distance wasn't great, maybe 50 feet, but it felt like miles. The little girl disappeared beneath the surface just as I reached her. I dove under, the water stinging my eyes as I searched desperately for a red blur. Visibility was terrible. Too many bodies, too much commotion. And then I found her, her small body slowly sinking to the bottom of the pool, her eyes open in silent panic. I grabbed her and pulled us both up, breaking the surface with a desperate gasp. "Lifeguard?" I shouted, my voice carrying the authority of years of commanding. Ships in storms, medical emergency. The noise in the pool stopped instantly. All eyes turned to me as I carried the girl to the edge. Her parents rushed over, horror on their faces as they realized what was happening. I placed her on the ledge and began checking her vital signs. She wasn't breathing. I immediately began CPR, counting out loud as I pressed on her small chest. "Did someone call an ambulance?" I asked, not taking my eyes off her. "I already called." I heard Diego's voice behind me. At least someone was paying attention. I continued the compression, speaking softly to the girl between counts. "Come on, honey, breathe for me. You can do it. Breathe." That's when I felt her small ribcage contract beneath my hand. She coughed violently, water gushing from her mouth, and then drew in a desperate gasp. The relief that flooded my body was almost paralyzing. I helped her roll onto her side as she continued to cough and breathe in ragged gasps. Her parents were crying, her mother repeating, my baby," while her father appeared to be in shock. The ambulance arrived within minutes. I explained to the paramedics what had happened, using the medical terminology I'd learned from my years of training. They nodded, respectful and efficient, as they prepared the girl Riley. I learned when her mother spoke to her for transport. "Good job," one of the paramedics said to me as they wheeled the stretcher out. "A few more minutes, ... He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what a few more minutes of inaction would have meant. It wasn't until the ambulance left that I realized a crowd had gathered around us. Guests, staff, managers, all watching in shocked silence. Among them was Ethan, his normally tanned face now pale. Douglas stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Everyone, please return to your duty," he announced. "The situation is under control." Drinks on the house at the main bar. The crowd slowly dispersed, many still casting glances at the scene. Douglas turned to me, and for a moment, I thought he was going to reprimand me for intervening outside my designated area. Instead, he said, "My office. Now, bring Ethan." The short ride to Douglas's office was silent and tense. Ethan kept his distance from me, as if my presence were an accusation. In a sense, it was. In the office, Douglas didn't offer us seats. He remained behind his desk, his knuckles white as he leaned against the polished surface. "Explain," he said. Simply, Ethan began speaking, his words coming out in a nervous rush. It was an accident, an isolated event. No one could have predicted... ... double quotes. "I saw it coming," I interrupted, my voice calm. Her cuffs were leaking. She was in the deepest part for her size. Her parents were distracted. And there were no lifeguards watching the water because everyone was taking part in a photo shoot. Douglas looked at Ethan, who seemed to be shrinking under his gaze. "Is that true? We were promoting the new cocktail menu as you requested," Ethan defended himself. "We couldn't be everywhere at once." "Yes, you could," I replied. "That's exactly what rotation protocols are for. That's why we always keep our eyes on the water. It's literally the definition of being a lifeguard." Douglas sighed, running a hand through his gray hair. "A child almost died today," he said, his voice low but intense. "In my pool, in front of hundreds of witnesses. Do you know how much a malpractice lawsuit costs? Do you know what that would do to our reputation?" The mention of reputation and costs before security infuriated me, but I maintained my composure. This wasn't the time for a discussion about values. It was the time to ensure something like this never happened again. "I need you both to leave," Douglas continued. "I'll consult with our legal department on how to proceed. For now, consider yourselves on administrative leave." "Douglas," Ethan protested, "you can't be serious. I've built a world-class program here. One failure doesn't define ... A child almost died," Douglas repeated, slamming his hand on the table. "This isn't a failure. It's a catastrophe narrowly avoided thanks to Charlotte." We left the office in silence. In the hallway, Ethan finally spoke to me directly. "I hope you're satisfied," he said, bitterness in every word. "You just destroyed everything we've built." I stared at him, feeling not anger, but deep sadness. "What have we built? A security program that fails in its most basic duty? A spectacle that prioritizes appearances over lives? It wasn't me who destroyed it. It was you, when you decided that looking good was more important than doing good." I left him there and went to the locker room. I changed my wet clothes into dry ones and was about to leave when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Charlotte Hayes speaking. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Jennifer Lawrence, Riley's mother." The voice on the other end was choked but firm. "The hospital gave me your name. I needed to talk to you." I felt a lump in my throat. "How is she?" "She be fine," Jennifer replied, and I could hear her smile through her tears. "The doctors say there's no permanent damage, thanks to you." "I'm so relieved," she said sincerely. "She's a brave little girl. She wants to meet you," Jennifer continued. "When she's released, she says you're a water superhero." I laughed, unexpected tears stinging my eyes. "Tell her it will be an honor to meet such a brave young woman." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a moment, absorbing everything that had happened. I was technically unemployed, at least temporarily, but I had no regrets. A life had been saved. That was all that mattered. 3 days later, I received a call from Douglas. The conversation got straight to the point. "I want you back," he said. As head of the water safety team, I was momentarily speechless. And Ethan? Ethan is no longer with us, Douglas replied. After a thorough review of the protocols and practices he implemented, we determined they were not aligned with our safety standards. Translation: they realized how close they had come to disaster and were trying to protect themselves legally. What do you have in mind? I asked cautiously. A complete rebuild of the program, new training, new protocols, a return to the fundamentals of water safety. And we need someone with your experience to lead this. I considered the offer. I have some conditions, I finally said. Name them. Full authority over safety protocols. No compromises for photos or promotional events that distract from surveillance. And I want to implement a water safety education program for guests, especially children and parents. There was a pause, and then, I accept. When can you start? I've already started, I replied. Over the next few years, I completely transformed the resort's water safety operation. I brought back many of Marcus's protocols, adapting and updating them where necessary. I hired 2 new lifeguards with Coast Guard experience, creating a team more diverse in age and background. Diego and Mia remain, now committed to a more serious approach. You showed us what really matters, Diego told me during a training session. I'll never forget it. I implemented daily educational sessions for guests, teaching them signs of drowning, basic rescue techniques, and water safety awareness. To my surprise, they were incredibly popular. Month after the incident, I had special visitors at the pool. Jennifer and Riley Lawrence came to see me, accompanied by Mr. Lawrence. Riley ran up to me, now wearing a new set of armbands, better quality and properly inflated. You're the water superhero, she exclaimed, hugging my legs. I bent down to her eye level. And you're the bravest girl I've ever met, I replied. The Lawrences joined my water safety class that day, Riley paying solemn attention as I explained how to recognize when someone is in danger in the water. Thank you for saving our daughter, Mr. Lawrence said after class. And thank you for teaching others to be vigilant. We never imagined she was in danger. We just didn't know the signs. That's why I'm here, I replied. So everyone knows. Later that day, as I watched the pool from my perch, I noticed Douglas approaching. Customer satisfaction ratings have dropped 3% since you took over, he said, looking at his tab. My heart sank until he continued, but our safety rating has increased by 40%. And we just received an award from the Luxury Resorts Association for our water safety education program. Apparently, we're pioneers in the industry. He smiled, still not taking his eyes off the water. Safety may not be glamorous, but it's what allows glamour to exist. Douglas nodded slowly. You know, Ethan was right about one thing. Our job is to make guests feel safe. He just didn't understand that the best way to do that is to make sure they are actually safe. That night, sitting on the balcony of my small apartment overlooking the ocean, I reflected on the journey that brought me from the Navy to a luxury resort, from nearly being dismissed for being too slow to leading a revolution in aquatic safety. My phone rang. It was Marcus. I heard the news, he said when I answered. You're doing a great job, sailor. I'm just following your example, I replied. No, he said firmly. You're creating your own path and saving lives while you're at it. I gazed out at the ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore. The sea had always been my home, but now I had found new purpose in calmer waters. Sometimes the most important rescues happen not in stormy seas, but in still pools, under the bright sun, when you least expect it. And sometimes the person you rescue is yourself. In the weeks following the incident, Pacific Paradise Resort transformed. My approach to water safety wasn't just a return to Marcus's methods, but an evolution. I brought with me the lessons of the Navy discipline, constant vigilance, and preparedness for the unexpected. But I also recognized that we were at a luxury resort, not a warship. It was a delicate balance. Guests came to relax, not to be constantly reminded of potential dangers. My challenge was to create an environment that was simultaneously safe and carefree. I started by implementing a zone system. The main pool was divided into clearly demarcated areas by colored underwater rope screens for shallow areas safe for small children, yellow for intermediate depth, and red for the deepest sections. Each zone had specific requirements and a dedicated lifeguard. It's like patrol sectors in the ocean, I explained to my team during a training session. Each of you has primary responsibility for your zone, but you also maintain peripheral awareness of the bigger picture. Diego, who was becoming my right-hand man, hung on every word. He had changed. Since the incident with Riley, the carefree young man who saw the job as a stepping stone to a modeling career now took his responsibility with almost religious seriousness. "What happened to you?" I asked him one day while we were doing maintenance on the rescue equipment. He stopped checking the buoys and looked at me, his dark eyes unusually serious. "When that little girl almost drowned, I was less than 10 meters away from her, posing for a photo with a group of influencers. I saw her earlier playing with her parents. I smiled at her, and then I almost let her die because I was more worried about how I'd look on the resort's Instagram." His honesty touched me. "You've learned the most important lesson of being a lifeguard," I told him. "It's never about you. It's always about them." Our education program expanded rapidly. In addition to daily poolside information, we now offered formal swimming lessons for guests of all ages, CPR and first aid workshops, and even water safety club for children, complete with certificates and small prizes. To my surprise, Douglas was fully on board. After seeing how close we had come to tragedy, he had become a fervent advocate for safety, even when it meant overspending or implementing rules that some guests found bothersome. "You know what's really bad for business?" he told me during a budget meeting. "A fatal drowning. Compared to that, a few complaints about not being able to bring drinks into the pool are insignificant." In a sense, what happened to Riley had been a wake-up call we all needed. For the distracted parents, for the profit-driven management, for the young lifeguards absorbed in their own lives, and even for me, a reminder that my experience and instincts were still vital, regardless of what stopwatches or arrogant new leaders might say. Riley's story spread, first among staff, then among regular guests. She became something of a resort legend, the too-slow Navy veteran who saved a child when no one else noticed the danger. Some details were exaggerated in the retelling, as is often the case with oral histories, but the core remained true and powerful. One afternoon, while supervising the training of 2 new lifeguards, I was approached by an elegant, middle-aged woman I didn't recognize. "Are you Charlotte Hay?" she asked, extending her manicured hand. "I'm Victoria Kensington, Director of Operations for Sunburst Resorts International." I shook his hand, surprised. Sunburst was one of the largest luxury hotel conglomerates in the world, with properties on 5 continents. Pacific Paradise was just one of its many resorts. "Nice to meet you," I replied, instinctively straightening my posture as I often did in front of superior officers. Victoria smiled, noticing the change. "Ex-military, right? I can tell by your posture. U.S. Navy, 27 years of service. Impressive." She gestured toward the nearby lounge chair. "Can we talk?" I assigned Diego to oversee the training and joined Victoria. She ordered 2 iced teas from a passing waiter and got straight to the point. "I've been following what you've been doing here for the past 2 months, she began. "The transformation of the water safety program, the educational initiatives, the staff training. It's exactly the kind of approach we want to implement across all our properties." I was surprised. "That's gratifying to hear. Guest safety was always important, of course," Victoria continued, "but it was often treated as a formality, something to be checked off a list, not necessarily perfected. The incident here, with the little girl," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "it was a wake-up call for the entire organization. We could easily have had a tragic outcome and a devastating public relations crisis. Always the PR concern," I thought, but kept my expression neutral. "But what you did afterward was remarkable," Victoria continued, surprising me. "Instead of hiding the incident or treating it as an anomaly, you turned it into an opportunity for complete reform, and the results speak for themselves." She slid a tablet across the table, displaying graphs and statistics I'd never seen before. It was data from all Sunburst resorts comparing incident rates, safety ratings, and customer satisfaction. Pacific Paradise went from an average performer to a group leader in safety without significantly sacrificing overall guest satisfaction, Victoria explained. "In fact, as you can see here, Ratings related to tranquility and family friendliness have increased substantially. I nodded, not entirely surprised. Parents often told me they could finally truly relax, knowing their children were being watched by trained professionals who took their jobs seriously. That's why I'm here, Victoria concluded. I want to offer you a position as Director of Water Safety for the entire Sunburst Network. You would oversee the implementation of its protocols and programs across all 47 of our properties globally. It would be a consulting and training role, with a team under your command and reporting directly to the COO me. I was speechless for a moment, a rare thing for a Navy officer accustomed to responding instantly to any situation. That's unexpected, I finally managed to say. Victoria smiled. Think about it. The compensation package is substantial, and you would have considerable freedom to shape the program as you see fit. More importantly, you would potentially be saving lives on a much larger scale. I promised to consider the offer, and we said our goodbyes. I spent the rest of the day distracted, my mind processing this surprising turn of events. When my shift ended, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I walked to the beach and waded into the ocean. I swam beyond the surf zone, feeling the familiar embrace of the open sea. Floating on my back, watching the sky change from blue to orange as the sun began its descent, I reflected on the strange ways of life. If Ethan had never demoted me, if Riley had never slipped underwater that fateful day, I would still be leading water aerobics classes in a forgotten corner of the resort. Now, I was being offered a position that could impact the safety of thousands of guests around the world. When I returned to the beach, my decision was made. The next morning, I asked for a meeting with Douglas. He seemed nervous when he welcomed me into his office. Victoria Kensington told me she talked to you, he began, clearly uncomfortable. I want you to know that I will fight to keep you here. You've transformed our operation, and I don't want to lose that. I can match her offer, whatever it is. It's not about money, Douglas, I replied calmly. It's about impact. You know me well enough by now to know that I'm not driven by status or compensation. He nodded reluctantly. So you'll accept? Yes and no, he said, briefly enjoying her confused expression. I've negotiated with Victoria. I will accept the position of Director of Water Safety for Sunburst, but on one condition. Pacific Paradise will be my base of operation. I will implement changes here first, testing and refining them before expanding them to other properties. Douglas's relief was palpable. That's perfect, actually. We'll have the best of both worlds, and I want Diego promoted to head of water safety for this resort, I added. He's grown tremendously in the last few months and has real potential as a leader. Douglas hesitated. He's quite young, age. It's just a number, I replied with a small smile. I thought we had established that. He laughed, recognizing the irony. Okay, we'll try. But will you supervise him closely? Like an eagle, I promised. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. My new position required me to develop standardized training manual, universal safety protocols that could be adapted to different types of aquatic facilities, and educational programs tailored to diverse cultural contexts. It was an exciting challenge that combined my Navy leadership skills with my newfound knowledge of luxury hospitality. For each safety procedure, I had to consider not only its effectiveness, but also how it would impact the guest experience. Diego flourished in his new role. Initially nervous about the responsibility, he quickly found his own leadership style less rigid than mine, but just as effective. The younger team members respected him as one of their own who had proven himself, while the veterans appreciated his willingness to learn and adapt. On a particularly busy afternoon, I watched him from my new desk in the office overlooking the main pool. He was positioning his team ahead of a special evented children's party for the son of a famous celebrity, ensuring that each area had adequate coverage and that all lifeguards understood their roles. His gaze occasionally swept the pool, a habit I'd insisted everyone develop a constant check, assessing potential problems before they arose. When he noticed two children starting to play push and pull near the deep end, he gently intervened, redirecting them to a safer area without disturbing their fun. I smiled to myself. He had learned the most important lesson. Surveillance doesn't mean intimidation. Security doesn't have to ruin the fun. My phone rang. It was Jennifer Lawrence, who had become a friend since the Riley incident. Charlotte, guess what, Riley? Passed her level 2 swim test today. She's so proud. She wants to show you the medal when she comes to her birthday party next month. That's wonderful, I replied sincerely. Of course I'll be there. After hanging up, I stared out at the pool again, watching the dozens of people enjoying the water without a care in the world. They didn't know. They didn't need to know about the safety systems in operation around them, the watchful eyes protecting them, the meticulous procedures designed to prevent tragedy. And this, I realized, was the paradox of my profession. When we did our jobs perfectly, it felt like we were doing nothing. The absence of incidents didn't generate headlines. There were no medals for disasters averted. The true measure of our success was the ability of others to completely forget us. In the Navy, I was accustomed to recognition, medals, promotions, formal ceremonies honoring service and sacrifice. Here, my reward was more subtle, yet somehow more profound. The sound of carefree laughter, the sight of parents relaxing as their children play, the quiet knowledge that my work made it possible for others to set aside worries and simply live. 3 months after the Riley incident, Victoria hosted Sunburst's first water safety conference in Maui, Hawaii. Safety leaders from all Sunburst properties attended for a week of intensive training and implementation of the new protocol. On stage, before an audience of over 100 professionals, I shared not only the techniques and procedures I had developed, but also the underlying philosophy. Water safety in the luxury hospitality industry is a delicate dance, I explained. Our guests didn't come to be disciplined or reminded of dangers. They came to forget their worries. Our job is to protect them so discreetly and elegantly that they never realize how much effort is involved. I looked around the room, seeing a mix of seasoned veterans and enthusiastic youngsters, much like the team I had inherited at Pacific Paradise. Some of you may think you know everything about water safety because you were competitive swimmers, or because you look good in a lifeguard uniform, or because you took a weekend certification course. I paused, letting my words sink in. Others may think your decades of experience are all you need. You're both wrong. I walked across the stage, meeting the eyes of different people in the audience. True water safety comes from a mix of constant vigilance, deep technical knowledge, well-developed instincts, and, most importantly, humility. The water doesn't care about your appearance, your age, or your resume. It treats everyone equally with ruthless indifference. I told Riley's story not to brag about the rescue, but to illustrate how easily tragedies can occur when we divert our attention, when we prioritize appearances over substance, when we believe that it will never happen here. I ended my presentation with a surprising revelation. Sunburst is implementing a new program called Eyes on the Water. Each resort will have a dedicated team of spotters, employees from different departments trained to recognize signs of aquatic distress. They don't replace professional lifeguards, but they provide an additional layer of vigilance. The idea had come from an observation I'd made at Pacific Paradise. Waiters, cabana attendants, bartenders, they all had different perspectives on the pool and often noticed things that even vigilant lifeguards might miss. We'll expand our safety net, I exclaimed. Every extra pair of trained eyes is another chance to catch something before it becomes an emergency. The conference was a success, with property managers and security directors committing to implement the new protocol. Victoria was thrilled. This goes beyond safety, she told me during the closing reception. We're redefining how the hospitality industry approaches responsibility for guest well-being. And it all started with you refusing to accept inadequate standards. I took a sip of my champagne, pondering her remark. I don't think it was all that noble, I admitted. At first, it was more about wounded pride. I was put down because I was considered too slow, too old. I wanted to prove myself. Victoria smiled. Initial motives rarely matter as much as subsequent action. You could have simply accepted your new role and done the bare minimum. Instead, you turned a difficult situation into an opportunity for systemic change. I thought of Ethan then, something I hadn't done in months. Do you know what happened to Ethan Brooks? Victoria's expression hardened slightly. She's working at an independent resort in Cancun, from what I hear. Not in water safety, thank God. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and empathy. Ethan had made serious mistakes, putting lives at risk, but he had also been a product of an environment that valued style over substance. In a sense, he too had been a victim of a flawed system. You know, I've seen many leaders in my career, Victoria changing the subject. Military, executives, politicians, but you have something rare, the ability to turn tragedy into triumph, to see opportunity where others see only problem. Sunburst is lucky to have you. Back at Pacific Paradise a week later, I found a surprise waiting for me. The pool area had been renovated with a new addition, a discreet but elegant sign at the main entrance. Riley Lawrence Aquatic Center, it read, safety through surveillance. Douglas smiled at my reaction. The Lawrences donated generously to our water safety program, he explained. They wanted to honor not only their daughter, but also the system that now protects other children. I was overcome with emotion, speechless for a moment. It's ... perfect, I finally said. Later that day, during my usual round of the facility, I passed the office that had belonged to Marcus, then briefly to Ethan, and now to Diego. Through the open door, I saw the young leader speaking with a new recruit, an older man, probably in his 50s, with the muscular but slightly weathered physique of a veteran athlete. Experience is invaluable in this job, I heard Diego say. Speed is important, of course, but observation, judgment, the ability to anticipate problems before they occur, these are the skills that truly save lives. I kept walking, a smile spreading across my face. The cycle had come full circle. That evening, sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the ocean, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me there, from the Navy to a luxury resort, from nearly being discarded to leading a revolution in aquatic safety. My phone rang, was a text from Jennifer Lawrence, a photo of Riley smiling proudly in a pool, holding her swimming medal, with the caption, "Thanks to you. She didn't just survive, she's thriving." The tears came, then, unexpected and welcome. They weren't tears of sadness or regret, but of profound fulfillment, the kind I'd felt few times in my life, even after successful rescue missions in the Navy. Because now I understood a fundamental, sometimes, the most important rescues aren't the ones everyone sees and applauds. They're the invisible ones, the disasters averted, the tragedies stopped before they even begin. And sometimes, when we think we're being put down or discarded, we're actually being placed exactly where we need to be at the exact moment someone needs us. I raised my glass to the ocean that had been my home for so many years in a silent toast. To vigilance, I murmured, and to being in the right place, even when it feels wrong. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in dramatic hues of red and orange. Somewhere beyond that line, I knew, lay other oceans, other pools, other dangers awaiting, and now, thanks to my work, other vigilant people prepared to face them. It was no longer just about being quick enough for a rescue. It was about creating systems that made rescues less necessary. It was about changing the culture, not just responding to crises. And in that, I discovered there was a deeper satisfaction than any medal or promotion could ever provide. The next day, when I took my post at the newly appointed pool, I noticed something I had ignored before. Reflections of sunlight danced on the walls, created by ripples in the water, hypnotic, ever-changing patterns. Beautiful yet ephemeral, like life, I thought. Like opportunities, like second chances. A small boy ran past me, ready to jump into the pool, and I instinctively reached out my hand. "Easy, buddy," he said gently. "The water will be there when you get there." He smiled at me, slowing his pace, and I watched as he carefully entered the water, confident but cautious. And so my work continued, one watchful moment at a time.